Welcome back to Why Blank Lost for Big Brother 26. I almost said Why Big Brother Lost. No, it's Why Blank Lost for Big Brother 26. I'm David Bloomberg, and in my head, I'm currently doing a victory lap around my co-host Ovi Kabir, because I've been saying Angela had a 0% chance of winning, and last week Ovi called her a front runner. And so I'm also, wearing this nice
Rubbing it
shirt
in.
that says, I may be wrong, but it's highly unlikely.
Get it out of your system, David. Get it out of your system. I mean, I lost my winner pick last week, and now unfortunately, my basically secondary winner pick is gone as well. So it's been a hard week here, and I thought we survived it. I was excited watching that HOH competition, that double elimination, and nope, couldn't make it through. But you know who believes that Angela would have beat everybody? You know who that is, David? Angela.
So, well, yes. Well, she says that, but then she also said she would have been okay losing to chemo. So, yeah, I know she came out screaming that she was a threat. That's something we'll have to wait a little while to discuss. But I appreciate in other ways the House finally coming to a decision early this week, so I could plan out some of my notes for Leah ahead of time. Of course, that was more than offset by the fact that it was the double eviction, and so we had no idea who would join her. So yeah, it didn't matter. As usual, we still had to just wait till the last minute to figure it out.
We most definitely did, and we have a lot of notes to cover this week because we got two people who have played, I can't say the biggest of games, but different games and up and down trajectory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. With this being a double eviction, we have twice as much to discuss, as we'll look at both how Leah and Angela did in the game by comparing how they played to my rules for winning Big Brother, which I originally wrote 20 years ago in 2004 and have modified ever since. We will analyze both of them using what we saw on TV, live feeds, interviews, and other information. The most recent version of the rules is posted at robhaswebsite.com/bigbrotherrules. I also think now is a good time to remind people, as we have to do occasionally, that we judge players on their actions, not how much we do or don't like them, or certain fan bases do or don't like them. Spoiler alert, Leah and Angela did not play great games. So we are going to have some negative things to say about them. If you're a fan of one or both of them, that's great. But us criticizing their games is a totally separate issue. Don't be like the person on Twitter yesterday who literally I had never interacted with before and blocked me because I posted a link to the clip of me saying that I told you Angela had 0% chance of winning. Like, wow. This is my first interaction with this person. And she's like, I'm blocking you. I'm like, oh, okay. I don't know who you are, so I don't care.
We're getting the cautionary warnings out of the way here. I think I might be higher on some portions of the game, but that's kind of how it goes with David and I. Mm-hmm. And I'm excited because I've been waiting to have a player go home this year, essentially this season, where David can just drill into go through rule by rule by rule. And I think, unfortunately, we might have finally got here. It took a couple weeks, and it might have taken a couple double eviction, but yeah, it's tough because even when I'm scrounging for notes to find like some good things to say about it, it's going to be a hard week right here. So I'm excited to hear what you got to say, David.
Yeah, and we'll get to that. We usually have some other things to discuss about the week in general. And last week, I started off by talking about how it seemed like McKenzie finally had a glimmer of an understanding of what was going on in the game. Boy, howdy, did I speak too soon. I don't think the words were even out of my mouth before she was already showing that she is what we thought she was. Chelsea's puppet all the way.
Most definitely. I had high hopes for McKenzie too. And then this week, she basically did everything you'd say you shouldn't do. I mean, I wish she had production in here saying, don't do this, because I couldn't imagine. It's like a train wreck happening, a train going straight, and you see the things. It was a Titanic. You see the iceberg, and she had the ability to maneuver it. And she says, you know what, this might not be for my best for my game. It might not be best for my teammates' game, but it's something I need to protect Chelsea. And I'm like, but you're playing your game. You're playing. Aren't you trying to win here? I was confused because I didn't think Chelsea had that level of mist. Power to Chelsea that she's able to
Well, she
convince
does.
McKenzie to do it. But yeah, like if you gave me money to bet on this week how it would have gone out, it would not have been McKenzie taking out potentially her two closest allies of Angela and
Yep.
Leah.
Yeah. Yeah. Chelsea definitely has a mist. She has a different type of mist that I've noticed. It's a very slow working mist. Where she plants the seed, she waters the seed, she fertilizes the seed, often with BS. She lets it grow, she encourages it to grow. Sometimes she will even pretend she wasn't planting a seed, where someone will say, well, I want to do this, which is the opposite of what she wants to do. And she'll be like, okay, but that's not really her agreeing. It's just her avoiding a fight, knowing that she can circle around later and drop those seeds in there. And it usually works. Not always. It didn't work, when she wanted to save T-Core. And it's a little slower. So, like, she couldn't work it in the double eviction, which didn't matter. She didn't need to miss. She was the HOH. But she definitely has it. And it's, it's amazing to watch as other people just throw their games away. But you also have McKenzie, who admitted on the live feeds,
Mm-hmm.
I'm naive to a fault. Maybe you should fix that fault then. But, she said she came on the show to prove that she could make her own decisions. And she did. She made her own decisions right after Chelsea told her what her decisions were.
Yeah, it's so frustrating. That's the thing is I don't want to take anything away from Chelsea's ability to this because it's impressive. She has been able to maneuver herself throughout the whole game and convince people to make moves that might not be the best for themselves. I mean, I think her relationship with Cam is a perfect example where it's a very one-sided relationship where she's kind of watched out for herself, but ensured that Cam will watch over her because any move that Cam does that she did, where she might leave him out of the vote, he cannot do that to her. So in this instance with McKenzie, it's impressive for sure. But at the same time, I'm like, how much of the work is McKenzie doing here to help her miss herself? I mean, it's so frustrating because early game, McKenzie really wasn't completely in the steering wheel where she could kind of steer herself and her game forward. We weren't sure what she was going to be able to do, but she's found herself in really good positions in this game now through her own ability to win competitions and strategize with other people. But then it's the execution of the part. It's like you got the whole, you solved the problem. You just need to put in the right answer, and somehow she misses. She finds somehow to make the most complicated equation, and then gets the answer to be zero. And I'm like, what went wrong here? How do you not? It's so frustrating because I actually want McKenzie to actually do well. And I want her to actually be able to excel at her game. But it feels like right now Chelsea is just a juggernaut that doesn't have an opposition.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you're right. It's a combination. Chelsea is good. Other players like McKenzie are not. It was bad. It was really, really bad. Now, the most interesting aspect of the situation with McKenzie having been gaslit into believing the various things about Leah and treating them as if they were facts will be what she does when the show is over and she finds out. Will she accept that she was fooled, or will she find a way to double down? I know in the past day or two, she sort of almost started to realize what happened, but I feel like it's just a temporary thing. And Chelsea will pounce on her again to keep her thinking the way Chelsea wants to, kind of like a cult leader, And so I think what's going to happen is she's going to get out of the house and people are going to say, look, this, and this happened. And she's gonna be like, no, that's not really what happened. You weren't there. You don't understand. Much like Leah herself, we'll talk about it. Leah was saying while in the house, I made a mistake. I should have gone after Chelsea last week. And now that she's out, she's saying, no, I don't take back anything that I did. I made all the right moves and I would have gone to the end with Chelsea. So I don't know what happened in between, except that maybe she took a big whiff of Chelsea's mist on the way out. I don't know. She
I
got it.
sincerely don't know too. I mean, I think that was the thing I felt probably the most distraught about, hoping that you have. When we talked about Leah, and we'll talk about her a lot more
Oh
as we
yeah.
go on the show, but pre-game when we did our analysis, we talked about it, and I said, you know what? I think she's gonna be one of those players that she kind of learns the game as it goes, and then realizes, okay, this is how it should be played, and then maybe after post show, being like, hey, you know what? I realized I didn't play this the right way or that way, but I'm really interested in how the game could happen, and this is what I should have probably done. From all her interviews, that does not seem the case. It seems that she completely would 100% do every single thing she did already in the game one time over, because she thinks if she changed anything in the game, it wouldn't have an impact, which is like
Yeah.
absolutely insanity to my head to
Right.
hear that. But we'll get into that a little bit more.
I understand that in life. People will
Yeah.
say, "Oh, did you?" People will say to someone, "Well, do you wish you had won instead of doing this?" And that someone might say, "Well, that would have changed my whole life, so I don't know." Same with me. I look back and little things
Yeah.
that I did, just very small things. Like I got to know a particular person in at my college by gaming, and because of him, when I had to quickly find a job because my graduate funding was running out, he suggested the place that he worked. And because of that, I ended up where I am. I ended up, with the kids that I have, all those things. I ended up with the
Whole
past 30
butterfly
years
effect.
of my life, huge butterfly effect. So I can see like someone saying for
Hmm.
life, well, no, I wouldn't want to go back and change that,
Yeah.
like work a different job or get a different degree or do this, because who knows what would happen. This
Yeah.
was just the game. That's not the whole thing. But yeah,
Hmm.
she got a to-go bag of the Chelsea mist. That's what it was.
To go back into Chelsea, I need to see
Yeah.
that animated now.
So, all right. Well, we're going to get to Leah in a minute here. I didn't find anything in particular for our usual uh, Julie being wrong segment. As a matter of fact, she was right about a lot of the things she said to Dalton, which shocked the heck out of me. I don't know what was going on, but maybe she had AI answer for her or something like that. Um,
Ainsley.
yeah, Ainsley took over her body again and answered to Dalton Ross. That's what it was. So before we get to the rules, though, I do want to mention that the Survivor version comes in a shorter and much more colorful form as a poster. You can go to robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed, scroll down to the poster, click on it, order it, and it will be shipped out to you. And in addition to the poster, we have other ways you can get it. You can get the poster image on a t-shirt, because that way you don't have to carry the poster around with you everywhere you go. And then you can get the checklist on a t-shirt. So again, you can go to robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed for that. And speaking of Survivor, of course, did want to mention that I am doing still double duty. Why Blank Lost for Survivor started last week with special guest Jake O'Kane. And in a few hours, I will be recording, of course, with Jessica again and special guest Lindsay Carmine. So,
Double duty.
yes, yes. With that, Angela and Leah were essentially a duo in the house at this point. And they went out within an hour of each other. Both thought they had other relationships too, including the friend Leah thought she had in McKenzie. What changed so drastically that Leah went from feeling completely safe to heading out the door? And why was Angela, the eternal pawn who was used time and time again to eliminate others, finally sent packing in the quick turnaround of the double eviction? What did both of them do in the early game, especially to set themselves up for these evictions much later? At RHAP, we know reality TV, and we know why Leah and Angela lost. The first and most important rule is, of course, to scheme and plot. Except it wasn't for Leah. Or rather, she had no idea that was part of the game for at least like the first half of the season. For weeks on end, I literally forgot she was even in the house sometimes. As Joseph told Mike Bloom, Leah didn't really talk game with anybody for the first half of the game. And that was a lot of people's complaints about her. So I was one of the only people who was feeding her information and giving her stuff. Now, other than him, though, she just kind of went around the house being Leah, doing Leah things. She justified it by saying things like, only fools rush to take sides. You can read it in any book. And then she would wonder why she was on the bottom for so long. Finally, a little later, she said, I haven't committed to any alliance because they all keep getting blown up. While also wondering, how come nobody wants to work with me? I'm cool. I'm fun. People should want to work with me. I could also quote a number of things that other players said about her, but they all point to the same issue. To be blunt, she truly had no clue. Now, she wasn't the only one. We talked about McKenzie. She was right there with her, which makes it somewhat amusing that McKenzie was the one who sent her packing. But they're really two sides of the same coin. Leah didn't make any early alliances, so she had nobody to fall back on once her later allies were voted out, in large part due to her own mistakes. And there was simply no way she was going to find a crack in the other alliances like Chelsea and Cam or Chemo and Rubina because they'd been together for so long. McKenzie similarly didn't make any early alliances, but once someone finally did decide to make use of her, she bought into everything they told her.
Very much so. And I think it's very valid that you pointed out the fact that it was primarily her own doings that the allies that she eventually got along with her were gone. I mean, we have to look at it. She was played kind of a lay low game in the beginning where she wasn't in much danger. Her strategy that she needed to strategize, it was kind of just float on. I mean, she played a very good floater game in the beginning because she didn't have to worry about that. And so someone like Leah was able to kind of focus on her social game as she strategized, as she continued on without any worry about being targeted. And so what we found out is that, we didn't see much from her in the initial weeks, but she didn't need to. Again, the counterintuitive of that, the opposite of that is that, well, if you're not working so hard in the beginning, is how do you make those allies? But for Leah, actually, it kind of lucked out. She got strong allies to her side that through her own doings, she didn't. Because I wonder too is that in the beginning of the game, because she didn't have to strategize as much, that when Quinn and Joseph were at her side, maybe she didn't realize, okay, this is how I should play the game with them because she was playing still week 1, 2, 3 by the time it was week 8 and 9.
Right. Yeah. I mean, she eventually learned at least somewhat that she was playing a game, but it was too little, too late, and she just wasn't very good at it. She, like you said, a lot of what happened to her allies was her own fault. She couldn't find a crack in other alliances, but she kept creating cracks in her own. And, this continued for a while. Looking back at my notes, on August 13th, she mentioned being scared because nobody was talking game with her. On August 25th, she finally had an epiphany and told T-Core she just realized there's a large group controlling everything and telling others they're working with them, but they're not. On September 2nd, she told Chemo she was oblivious previously of alliances that were forming around her. She slowly started to catch on. I mean, like, if she had been on Survivor would have been over by the time she even realized the game was being played.
That's true. Yeah, no, I mean, I was going to say, you're exactly right in that regard. I mean, Big Brother is one of those games where you can have a little ability to mature into it because you have that 100 days to kind of get yourself ready in there. Other games you don't. So she was on the right game show for it. But, it was kind of confusing because for me, I thought in the beginning it was kind of more of an act where this act of playing oblivious, I don't understand what's going on because
Can I just interrupt? I'm sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
This seems to be, and this is not a direct criticism of you, but I think you fell prey to the Big Brother fandom here. So many people want to think highly of the people on Big Brother. I mean, I want to think highly of it too, that they ascribe to them this like super genius mentality where there's no evidence of it. Like, oh, there's no possible way this person could be that bad. That must be an act. I mean, people are still saying that about Cam. and his comps
Uh,
and everything else. It's like,
that's
no,
the
it,
dogs in the crib.
no, it is not an act. Okay. There is no evidence that any of this is an act. If they are not telling us in camera talks or in diary rooms that it is an act, then it is not an act. Sorry.
No,
Cut me
I'm
off.
glad you threw that. You definitely fed some people who've been waiting to hear something like that. They're happy. They're on your side, David. Our viewers, a lot of them, and other viewers will be like, all right, hold up, hold up. For me, I think that I always, again, I probably too much faith in the system, right? And this thing, but I always think once they're cast on there has to be something that brought them on there, and hoping that the new casting with it going on, we want some form of strategy. They saw Leah that she might have had some sort of strategy where I want to play a lay low game, because the issue is the game was kind of, I don't mean to say, it was handed to her in a lot of ways. Her strategy was handed to her. Her allies were handed to her. She didn't have to work. We had Quinn and Joseph, two mega super fans who love this game, willing to throw their bodies under a railroad track just for the glimmer to see Leah for 2 minutes through the crack of a window. All right, just to see her outside in the sun. That's what they would do for their game. Just throw it all away. And she didn't work for it. She's like, you know what? Actually, toss you into the trash can. She put them on the block. We saw all that. And for me, she was lined up perfect. And then even when she won HOH, she was lined up perfectly in a position where she was now finally between two big alliances. Now, maybe she should figure out a way to work with one side and not revolt against the other side in the next week. What does she do? Doesn't do any of that. She just focuses to help both of them instead of herself. I mean, it's complete travesty the way she played again. But maybe you're right, David. Maybe we have too much faith in these players.
Well, yeah. I mean, like I said, when she started to play, finally, she was just bad. She vetoed Angela against Quinn's wishes. Like you said, she had two super fans giving her advice, and she's like, nah, I'm going to do what I want. And she didn't even tell him ahead of time, even though she knew he was planning to nominate Joseph as replacement if necessary. And yes, we already gave him his big chunk of the blame for doing it. But she knocked down that first domino, all because it was her first taste of having power and she just had to use it. And then as she continued to play, she still was hesitant about doing the right thing. Chelsea recently said Leah was upset that nobody wanted to bring her into an alliance, but noted it goes both ways. Make your own alliance. Of course, by that time it was too late, and Chelsea had knocked out her two closest allies. But speaking of too late, even this week, when she had been nominated, she waited until 5:00 Wednesday evening to even talk to Cam about his vote. And I know that time, which normally I wouldn't take note of necessarily, this specific time, because he called her out on it. He was like, really? This is the time that you're waiting to talk to me? And she made an excuse. Well, I had bad time management. But he was like, no, it wasn't time management. It was your choice to talk to McKenzie, Chelsea, Angela, and not him. Now, was he ever changing his mind and keeping her? No. Okay, because Chelsea didn't tell him he could. But she certainly wasn't going to convince him by ignoring him.
No, she wasn't. And I mean, it's one of those things where, especially with Cam too, she had some form of relationship within the game with him earlier in the house. Like, just kind of just let the wind take her and see how it would go. And I think that was my frustration watching her in the game. I think the best way to encapsulate it is when Quinn, he was on his knees begging her, please, please don't use the veto. Please, I'm begging you on my knees. That's how I felt as a viewer, and probably the fans felt for Leah. Please use strategy. Please, Leah. Please, just do something. Do whatever your brain is thinking. Do the opposite of it. Just for once, just take the autonomy that you have in the game and try to do something that will benefit your own game without destroying the allies around you.
Wasn't that a George Costanza thing in Seinfeld? Like, he realized he always made the wrong decision, so he started doing the opposite of what he thought was right.
That's what I do with my bets. I always know I'm going to lose a bet if I do on a team, so I just do the opposite, and somehow it's working. So, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the way it felt for her, truly.
Yeah, and the thing is, I mean, even when she was voted out, and Julie asked who she planned to go to the end with, she said, I never really like to plan that far ahead or make final threes. Really? Really? You were at final 7 and you didn't plan for a final 3 or to plan that far ahead.
Wow.
2 weeks. This game only lasts another like 2 weeks and 2 days or something at this point. And that's considered planning far ahead? I wish I could say I was surprised, but it completely fits.
Yeah, I mean, I think it also encapsulates. Again, I don't like to rag on people for like their exit speeches because I know there's a lot of stress on there, there's a lot of feelings there. But I mean, I think that kind of showcased her game. It was just an inability to explain herself why she should be here and what she was doing. When she also had an advantage over the people, she could have spun a very good narrative why she should, in her position, stay over Angela. And I think she could have convinced other people, but she was unable to do that. And also, like you said, she waited way too long in all cases to do such a thing.
Yeah. She did have a chance a couple times to do some real playing, to make a mark, better her position. Last week when she was HOH, she was sitting between the two trios. She could have gone after either one or put up someone from both. Now, in our YT Core Lost podcast, I noted that different people had different takes on whether or not she made the right decision, and it was certainly worth a debate. But at the time, it seemed like T-Core's trio was the more solid one because there was a bit of squabbling among the Chelsea Cam McKenzie group. And plus, let's face it, Leah just liked McKenzie more and thought she'd stay on her good side by protecting them the same way Quinn had previously protected the. Wait, no, when Quinn protected them, they voted him out the next week. Oh, yeah, maybe she should have learned something from that. But anyway, nominating both T-Core and Chelsea would have been the best move because it would have caused the opposing factions to actually square off with one another. But she took the easy route and left Chelsea fully in power, just as McKenzie was at fault this week for listening to and following Chelsea. Leah was last week. And I was going to say she only realized it after it was too late. As she would later say, I should have seen it. I should never have sent T-Core home. It's 100% my fault. But then just when I thought, oh, wow, it was finally starting to dawn on her, she got that to-go bag of mist. And her interviews were truly astonishing because even though we saw her acknowledge that she did the wrong thing, and by the way, that acknowledgement, we'll talk about this later, hurt her also. But we saw her acknowledge it. And she got voted out. She is now rationalizing and justifying everything to herself, saying that if she'd stayed, she would have stayed loyal to Chelsea, Cam, and McKenzie, and she thought that she had a chance to beat Chelsea at the end.
Oh, that hurts. That hurts just to think of that. I mean, here's the thing. Maybe there's some other players in the house too, and just because of voting, they have an idea they can beat Chelsea, and maybe they can in some shape or form. At Chelsea right now, the idea that she is somebody to drag to the end or you can easily beat is just laughable. I mean, she is the one player who actually can talk about her game, and she has played a wonderful game in itself too. Again, has it been helped by her cast members for their inability to play certain situations? Yes, well, that's every cat. You can't blame Chelsea for that. She plays with the hand she's given. Yeah, I mean, in total, I think Leah's game was missing the game element. I mean, for her to get as far as she did is impressive, but also at the same time, like we said, we had players throwing themselves at her to actually just utilize them. And she did utilize them. She literally used them as a match and burnt them up and went home. And what hurts me the most is I think you have to be committed one way or the other. It's kind of like when you're driving. Sorry, the viewers know when you're driving a car, an analogy of a car. You see on the GPS, you're supposed to just right, but you're already far in there. Now, do you take the lane over to the right and cut off somebody and crash? No. You just go straight and figure out a way to turn around eventually, Sometimes you have to commit. When she committed to telling Rubina and Chemo that, hey, I think Chelsea is the person we need to go after that, but then completely walks that back when she's found out, she needs to either lean into it with them like, hey, you threw me out there, but I still want to work with you, or the other way, when she already is going against T-Core, lean into the commitment, like, all right, we need to get Rubina and Chemo out next to. We have that vote right there sitting in the jury. If we don't get all three of them out there, that's 2 votes going to one of them, no matter what. Yeah. She kept flip-flopping and playing that middle just in a very bad way.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've beaten up on Leah's game enough. Let's switch over to doing it to Angela, because she had very different problems with this rule. She was certainly playing the game from the very beginning. It's just that she was bad from the start rather than waiting till later to become bad. Now, Angela was, of course, the first HOH, and I originally thought she'd last approximately 1 week after that, because she, of course, lost her mind. I remember in the Why Matt Lost podcast, I said, well, I don't want to talk too much about Angela in the intro part because I have a feeling we'll be talking about her next week. And here we are, many weeks later, finally. But at the time, I mentioned that some players get HOH-itis, but Angela got HOH-anoia. And, we can never forget crazy eyes. That will be something that lives with us forever. And her believing that everyone was acting in a low-budget movie as late as mid-August, maybe even still today. Angela still thought the collective was a fake alliance and everyone was lying to her. Now, as it turned out, she also had massive paranoia even when she wasn't HOH, and frequently invented things in her head that just weren't happening. In our preview podcast, I said Angela was saying she was going to rely on her supposed detecting abilities, and I thought she would be too trusting because they wouldn't work. Turns out they were the opposite. She relied on them, but they were always detecting lies and plots and conspiracies to the point that she was overly paranoid about every conversation that went on in the house, leading her to turn on allies left and right until she finally settled down very late in the game. She would be on the outs, get pulled in by someone for one reason or another, and then turn on them. As Quinn said about Angela, she's with you until she convinces herself that you're the problem.
Yeah, Angela, I mean, man, probably one of the most entertaining Big Brother players we've had thus far for a very long time. But we're not evaluating her on her entertaining values. We're evaluating her on her game. And Angela's game was all over the place. It was one of those anomaly ones where, again, I do think she built up her equity near the end where I was like, okay, I do see her as a front runner. And I still would argue that if she finds a way to the final two, I think
we'll talk about that later. But yeah, I mean, you can, you can,
no,
can say it all you want. That won't make it true,
But game-wise, the way she strategized in this game was very interesting. I think I likened it as I wrote down as a hyena. She would really try to find a pack. However she could, she would eat off her own leg, though she needn't to escape anything. I mean, it was every ally was in danger week in and week out. I mean, she was, truly a Russian roulette gun where you don't know when the bullet is going there. There's one in the chamber and there's 6 rounds. Like she's clicking. Oh, actually, it's my ally. I'll still shoot it off. I mean, the way she played was pure paranoia. And we say HOH-itis. She just had Big Brother-itis. Every week, whether she was power or not power, she found a way to stress herself out. And it's impressive that she was able to navigate the game with this level of, paranoia where she made weeks where she wasn't even a target, her becoming kind of a target because they're like, you know what? I don't really know if I want her around. I'm scared she's scaring me off. But I think her ability to kind of do that consistently made it so that the other players around her judged her on that. They didn't think much of it because she did all that was the new normal. Wow. So in a way, her strategy of being completely paranoia almost let it be like it's kind of like I liken it to the crazy uncle at the table. They're gonna say some crazy things out there, and it's because it's dumb. You're like, oh, all right, thanks. You just like let's just get through it. We're not there. But if it's like a one-off thing or a random person, you're like, that's strange. Again, you let some stuff pass, and I think you love that the house guests let that pass with Angela with her strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this, unlike Leah, she was trying. Every time she was on the block, she campaigned hard for herself. Yeah. And now her own campaigning was rarely, if ever, the reason she was actually saved, but at least she was trying in comparison to people like Leah or Rubina or Chemo in particular, who would just be sitting there on the block saying, "Que sera, sera, whatever will be, will be." And she was forceful in other game ways too, such as when she heard Tucker and company talking and just decided she was going to forced them to bring her into the alliance. So she marched right in and said, I want to be in your group, even if I'm just on the bottom. And then, of course, later complained about being on the bottom. But again, like I said, like you said, she was paranoid. She was delusional. She A perfect example was in her goodbye message to Joseph, where she said she knew he had been behind Quinn's decision to nominate her. And Joseph, being honest and blunt type of guy that he is, he's sitting there going, no, I had nothing to do with that. He then told Mike Bloom that her saying she knew that was crazy. Quote, you don't know anything that's going on. And he added to Entertainment Weekly, that's just been her the whole season. She just takes little things and contextualizes it in her own way. She's super delusional as far as the game goes.
Yeah, I mean, we have been getting hints from all the players as they've left. Good thing is that the people in the jury, though, I think was feeling some sort of way about Angela.
Oh, they're feeling some sort of way. It's just not some sort of good way.
Exactly. And I'm interested to see how she will be in the jury house itself, with just being mixed around with all of them. But I thought what was interesting, too, was that how she was able to get people to trust her via her game. I think that was impressive to me. She turned on him, but to get Tucker, for example, at her side, the way she was playing. And I think people knew Angela was a bulldog in the sense of that, or like into a hyena earlier, but like somebody who just keep on trying, wouldn't roll over. And I think certain allies in the house appreciated that. So it was tough because it was like, would you rather have an ally, right, who does nothing, just floats around, kind of like into Leah, unfortunately, or would you have Angela on the exact different spectrum where they don't just stop trying, they just keep on going, whether it's a detriment of their game or your game, one or the other. Which is kind of interesting when you think we have such a parallel between Leah and Angela, who ended up trying to be the closest allies right at the end.
Yeah, I just. Yeah, I don't know. You did mention the jury house. This has nothing to do with this rule or any other rule, but I was thinking about, Quinn. He's sitting there waiting at the jury house, waiting, twiddling his thumbs, and he's going to see Leah walk in. He's going to be like, yes, Leah, I get to spend time with Leah. And then the other car is going to pull up, and it's Angela. And he's just going to crash right there. No!
I already can imagine there's gonna be a segment of the jury where it's like Leah and Quinn trying to get some alone time just to chat and whatever, and then it says Angela like, "Hey guys, hey guys," like no alone time at all. Yeah, it's truly sad for Quinn because he could have got just if it wasn't double eviction, it's him and Leah there spending bonding time, but no, it's a party. It's three of them now.
Yes. So getting back to Angela, twice in a row, she was left out of the majority and voted to evict Chemo when, of course, Chemo stayed. Now, at least the second time was on purpose because McKenzie talked about how she wasn't going to tell Angela how to vote in order to expose the fact that she really wasn't part of the group making decisions. As Cam said, when Angela played her own game, she sank herself. It was other people who kept her game going, which is something I'll get to more when we get to the sixth rule. In talking about Leah and Angela in this rule, there were clearly a lot of differences, but there were some major similarities. And I think the primary one was, as we already talked about with Leah, they were both completely outplayed, mostly by Chelsea.
Yeah, I mean, they had a handshake together now. Will we be missing by Chelsea? Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, they were both thinking that she was their ally and thought the most of them. But I think they forgot too that when you are playing both sides, you're unreliable with your play style. For certain players like Chelsea, that's an issue. That's and we'll talk more about it being threat wise in there. But for them, your strategy is who you are, right? It doesn't matter how good you are, like as a person in the house, how you're carrying, especially later in the game. It is how you play the game. How can we trust how you voted? Can we trust that you can strategize with us? Can we trust that you won't blab your mouth about everything with us? And so, unfortunately, both of them did badly on both accounts of that. Angela more so, but at some point, there's only so many checks you can write. And in that house, from very beginning, from week one, it set the tone of how Angela is going to play. I mean, confrontational to the point where at some point, the strategy gets aligned with that. You don't want to work with that. So, I mean, I think that was their issue. And again, they're both on each end of the spectrum, but somehow, like you said, David, they have similarities where it put people off in the way they played the game.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we can move to the second rule, which says not to scheme and plot too much and to keep your scheming secret. Leah mostly just schemed and plotted poorly, as we discussed, rather than too much. But there were times where she crossed that line. For example, while Chelsea had been pushing for McKenzie to nominate and evict Leah all week, and I think she would have succeeded in convincing McKenzie anyway, Leah gave her some ammunition to help her along, and it was specifically something we mentioned already. She told Rubina about how she regrets not making a bigger move when she was HOH last week, and even brought up Chelsea's name. I have no idea why she believed she could trust anyone in the house with this information, but especially Rubina, who had just lost her closest ally thanks to Leah, and who had her other closest ally on the block at the time that this was said.
For me, I think the only way I can make sense of her feeling like that, because I don't think there really is a world would, is just the way, because we perceive things with our own perspective, our own POV. And her POV for her was, well, you know what? Chelsea did take out my allies. They went back home. Joseph went home. Quinn went home. And I still have to work with them. It is what it is. Because I don't think she valued, like, I mean, we talked about it. If you value your allies truly, you wouldn't put them in that position.
Right.
And I don't even think it was just a game idea where she didn't value them as players in the game. Like, she didn't look at it the game like that. So because of that, I think she maybe viewed Rubina in that same light where, all right, well, Tico went home, but like, it is what it is. She's still here, so we could still work together. Again, it doesn't still make sense. And this is kind of the biggest downfall that we can directly showcase of this week, where talking a little bit too much does not help you out here. She was not able to scheme in the right way. That was just kind of level-headed. And again, I think that I was frustrated with the lack of urgency it felt this week, or the way it was at least portrayed, where we saw it becoming last minute. McKenzie being her closest ally, this is something you try to tackle beforehand. Even talking with Angela and her, trying to figure out, like, maybe we should both try setting up spot, because we talked to McKenzie and be like, hey, we are a strong trio.
No. It's way too soon to be talking about final threes. Come on, don't get crazy.
Yeah, that's true. You're trying. You probably maybe did not last night, or maybe when your final two, when you're sitting next to them, you talk to them about that.
Yeah, that would be a good time. Yeah,
maybe the jury house.
Yeah, they could talk about there. They could be like, we're the final jurors. You know,
final jurors.
Yeah. Other conversations that Leah supposedly had in the house. People were saying one thing or another, that she was telling them things that she shouldn't, and it gave just enough for McKenzie to question her loyalty. And there was even discussion of her veto usage as a mark against her for only caring about herself when her closest ally told her not to do it. If Leah could blindside her number one, then she could do that to anyone. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, McKenzie. Not to mention, earlier in the game, she couldn't keep her mouth closed about Quinn, throwing him under the bus multiple times. All those bad moves stuck in the back of the mind of certain people, and they came back to haunt her because they were seen as over-scheming.
With allies like Leah, who needs enemies?
Yes.
I literally, we talked to death about this, but for me, Leah was the biggest frustrating point for, like, when Quinn went home. Even though, I was like, oh, David's winner pick is gone, the Summer King Quinn is gone, but for him and Joseph, both of them, I mean, again, there's definitely things they could have done themselves. But when you have your closest ally, especially when they're in power and different occasions, you would never assume that they would either thwart your own HOH or also on their HOH basically send you home. Frustrating. It's crazy to think about all how she misplayed that. But yeah, I mean, it's completely. She was. Anytime she tried to do something, it didn't work. I mean, the one part we were like, hopefully she can get this, because her strategy was to win that veto competition that she needed to activate the janky veto and then maybe make a move. But she wasn't able to do that. And at that point, you let that to rest. You don't bring that up.
I'm still not sure if she wasn't able to or she wasn't trying. That still isn't clear to me. I think she said, I know she said contradictory things. So
yeah.
Now, going back to the Quinn stuff, what's particularly funny about them using that against her is that we, of course, discussed how Quinn was evicted in part because of his obvious duo with her. And I would add that Leah kept making obvious duos. She had the one with Quinn, then she had one with Angela, which was also part of the discussion to convince McKenzie to flip on her because others hammered on the idea that, oh, Leah's always going to choose Angela over you. And, part of that Quinn had predicted. If you veto her, people are going to associate the two of you.
Yeah, I mean, over and over again, it was trying to get that information that what she was hearing and actually make it work into something that would be useful. It was just difficult. It was whether it's miscommunication, mistranslation, or it was just I wanted to go through one ear and out the other. All these factors played in itself that she found a way to be consistent in one thing and make the wrong move. That was what it was. She was consistently making the wrong move. And I almost wish there was certain cases where she did overplay earlier in the week because then I think she could have had to try to rectify things. But like we said, she started playing the game the first 2-3 weeks. In the final weeks that she was still there.
Right.
You can't do that. And so at that point, you don't have a chance to learn from your mistakes and rectify it because your first few mistakes you start making more so catch up to you a lot more now.
Yeah. Yeah. Meanwhile, we had Angela. And she was over scheming from the get-go as part of her paranoia. There are many examples of her saying and doing things she shouldn't have in this regard, but let's stick to a few highlights. For example, she revealed Quinn's power when there really wasn't a good reason to do so. He had stupidly confided in her, but she could have found a way to use that information to her advantage. And instead, she, played this little game where she revealed it while acting like she wasn't, as if she could somehow keep the moral high ground, as she was like hinting to Tucker and trying to lead him on. And it reminded me, I may have used this example before, but it reminded me of my old Sunday school teacher who would say things like, the person in trouble knows who they are. I won't mention their name, fourth seat in the third row. That was the kind of game she was playing. Like, I won't say who has it, but he has long curly hair and, come on. But even funnier was that Tucker didn't believe her because she was already not a reliable source at that point.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, were you the long curly hair? Are we saying David Bloomberg back in the day had the long curly hair?
No, I never had long hair.
I need a photo. I need a photo of that right there.
No, Quinn
that
with
is
the long curly hair. I may have been the one in the fourth seat in the third row who the Sunday school teacher was talking about, but
funny. No, but you completely hit it on the nail. I mean, the way she continuously did a little too much and a little more and more. And the crazy thing was people started expecting that. They knew how Angela was going to react. So let's try to not have her react as much, give her the benefit of that. And she'd find a way to exceed that. I mean, it goes from week one where we love it as viewers, but we thought, hey, just sending you home soon enough, that huge monologue against Matt. I mean, making I think we can say retroactively, looking back at a mountain out of an anthole.
Yeah,
it's something not big, and we weren't sure really what happened because initially that week, but now I think looking at all her actions, we're like, okay, that's kind of her MO. That is her way of gaslighting people around her to make them feel like they're in the wrong. But I think when people catch on that, then it completely blows up in your own face, which we consistently saw her do anytime she tried to scheme. It wasn't scheming, right? She over schemed, over paranoia. I mean, it made everyone distrust her to the point where any plans that she tried to input would not work.
Yeah, I mean, we already discussed how someone would bring Angela into the fold and she'd turn on them. And a lot of that was over scheming and backstabbing without a good reason. Well, without a real reason. The reasons were all in her head. If she saw you whispering, she assumed it was about her and therefore turned on you at the first opportunity. And this became one of the primary reasons that Angela was the eternal pawn. Chemo said to T-Core early in the game, keeping Angela is not a bad idea. She could just professionally be on the block. And T-Core continued the thought by adding, as punishment for all the ruckus she's caused. Separately, T-Core told Joseph, sorry, girl, you're a pawn this season. It could have been different if you just came for Matt, but you came for everyone.
And she did, and I think
Yeah.
we see that becoming the full downfall this last week, where it's McKenzie, right? And being in that hot seat. Well, she didn't go home on McKenzie's one, but it was very close to being in. McKenzie being somebody who's her ally, somebody she's really close with. But I think the way Angela treated all her other allies, I mean, Tucker's a perfect example of it, where he stuck his neck out for her, said he's going to choose her, but she couldn't even believe that would actually be the case. And she's not her true final two. So basically, in like final 12, final 10, she's like, I need to cut you. Any of her allies, seeing how much Tucker took to go to bat for her, like, I gotta keep that in my head. My friend this week, my enemy next week.
Except for they didn't. They kept doing it. Leah did it and McKenzie did it. They did the same exact thing. I will say that Angela seemed to calm down a little bit in her final couple weeks. After going through it all, with Leah and Quinn and she was still spilling information. Cam told Chelsea and McKenzie that when he talked to Angela last week, she immediately said out of nowhere, I'm not working with Leah or chemo. And he says, I didn't even ask anything, which totally I believe because it's Cam. He doesn't. He said she was giving her game away. To me, it reminded me of like walking up to a little kid and the kid suddenly saying, I didn't take a cookie. And you're like, I better go count the number of cookies because I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, no, truly. I mean, she ensured people would feel some sort of way to distrust her, even if they didn't in that moment. And I think that we see this, like you said, it got better as the weeks went on, right? But even then, it just you only have so when it gets lot less people in the house, you have a lot less ability to kind of change your opinion on you because you've had so much time it's cemented. And for her, she kind of ran out of time for that. I mean, I think she was a definition of don't backstab if you don't need to, which she always did. She backstabbed anytime. Like she could. She had to change. She reveled in the fact. And I think that's the thing where we talk about, I think we mentioned this about Quinn before, had his downfall being kind of that he played that character. He reveled into the moment of like,
right.
All right, I'm in Big Brother. I want to play as much as I can. If I'm the villain, I'm the villain. For Angela, I think, which is great that I think she felt so satisfied that she got so far in the game. And it was like, I love what I've been able to do. But I think at some point, I wish it kind of dialed back for her to be like, all right, I've experienced this. I did this. Now let's win this.
Right.
Because the way she was acting, again, when I give her a little bit more equity than David does, I do think odds are it's a very untenable, which we did see, untenable way to win the game. You need to bring it back a little bit.
Or a lot of it. Yes.
Or a lot of it is the case.
All right, we can go to the third rule, which talks about the need to be flexible. How do you think Leah did here?
So with Leah, I think she was flexible, actually. I agree that she was flexible. Flexible in the fact that she was too flexible. She had no backbone in the things she had to do. I mean, I think because when we talk about flexibility, I always say you have to be challenged in some shape or form to see how you are. That's my common thing, and me and David go back and forth on it. And I think in this case, she was challenging it. Would she try to put up Joseph? Would she bail on Quinn for a veto use? And she did each way, but it was the wrong decision. If she was less flexible, she's one character. If we put T-Core, who was a brick of flexibility, and Leah, who was literally just any motion, it's those things that are outside of a car dealership that wave their hands with air going on it. Put them together and you have a great player in this category. But yeah, no, I think unfortunately she kind of went with whatever the wind hit her with, and she was unable to make concrete moves because none of her moves were her own. It was other people.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to disagree with you somewhat on this.
Okay, let's hear it.
This was a little bit more difficult for me to address because, my process is I take notes all season long. And then when the person loses, I go through and I pull those notes and I put them into their appropriate places. When I did that, this rule was blank for her because for most of her game, she wasn't really playing. So flexibility wasn't even an issue. But then when she decided to play, she went all the way to playing the way she wanted to. Now, the prime example was vetoing Angela after Quinn had explained to her multiple times why it was a bad idea. There was no flexibility there. She got power. She wanted to use it. That was it. Then she focused on just the people that she wanted to focus on instead of looking at the house as a whole. We've discussed some of these issues already, but her assuming that McKenzie would be on her side forever is a good example because it didn't allow her to see what was actually going on. Another example is what we talked about with not bothering to, chat with Cam this week until late Wednesday because he just wasn't someone she thought about. She talked to who she wanted to talk to, and the game didn't really matter.
Yeah, I think like in that regard, you're not wrong or off base in that. I mean, it's one of those things where I guess when she did start playing the game, she didn't move away with like how she wanted to play selfishly for herself. So even though if it was wrong in the sense of because usually I say it's good to play selfishly yourself, but I think the issue is that her moves were wrong. Her intuition was wrong on this, and she didn't trust her allies in that one. So I guess we judge it on that for sure. I do think though, yeah, I mean, because my argument was that she was so flexible, it was bad. Either way, she didn't.
Yeah.
She got a bad F grade on each of our categories right there.
All right. So what do you think of Angela for this rule?
Angela is a bit of a confusing person on here because I do think being a player the way she was, and I don't want to liken her to this player at all because I don't think it's right, but the idea of how Taylor Hale was on the block multiple times and found a way to manage to get herself off or work her way around it. Angela had a little Taylor-esque in that version.
Oof.
How she did that was very different. It was very different. No, hold on. Stay with me. The viewers don't dislike the video yet. Don't boo me yet. Okay, hear me out.
Boo.
I think because when we saw how Taylor played the game, right, and she definitely managed it and was much more flexible in the way she was able to operate there. I felt I appreciated Angela being able to work with different players when she was put on the block by them. Everyone put her on the block, and she was angry at them in ways. But I found a way. She still tried a way to work with it, to whether to work with this alliance, that alliance. I felt like Angela maneuvered herself sometimes too much, but she did it in a way where I think much lesser players or other players would have gone home before her because they wouldn't have the inability to pivot the way she did.
Yeah, I mean, my thing is, at one point Chelsea actually told her, oh, you're the Taylor Hale of this season. And it's like she was clearly just fluffing her up. There's no way anyone would believe that. But there have been people who have said, oh, she was on the block and taken off, and one person, when I said she had 0% chance to win, one person had responded to me and said, did you think Taylor could win? And I was like, yeah, that's two very different situations. But I guess you could say that Angela was incredibly flexible and that she was bouncing all over the place. But that would imply some amount of actual strategy involved when it was really more just her paranoia.
Yeah.
Maybe it's best to say reality was flexible in Angela's world.
I'll give you that one. POV, the reality, her perspective was reality in the Big Brother house. It was a very different one than the viewers got to see.
Yeah. All right. Well, we go to the fourth rule, which says players should not let their emotions control them. But it's clear that both Leah and Angela were perfect game bots who never allowed emotion to cloud their judgment one bit, right?
Exactly. I just, who needs, Ainsley when we have two robot AIs in these players?
Yes. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Maybe not. Starting with Leah, we've already mentioned a few times how much of her game didn't involve any strategy at all. So what did it involve? Emotions and her jumping around the house according to whatever those emotions told her. Overall, she did not do a good job of separating game and personal. This person was a friend. That person gave her the ick, and so on. Quite frankly, if Quinn hadn't fallen so hard for her, or Tikor and Chemo had found a spine between the two of them early on, Leah could easily have been booted a long time ago with all the crap she said that she shouldn't have. And she said it for emotional, not game reasons. She would air her feelings to just about anyone, not concerned about potential game consequences, much like she did with Rubina, just recently. But she was protected by T-Core and Chemo's unwillingness to tell Quinn, and Quinn's own unwillingness to see or hear what was happening, even on those few occasions when some of the information made its way to him.
Very valid. I mean, when we think about it, I think, it's hard to remember every single thing that happened for our viewers and listeners.
Mm-hmm.
But just as a reminder, essentially in initial weeks there, Leah's said a lot of things about Quinn in the sense that he gave her the ick, kind of creeped her out, which none of it was really validated. None of that, from what we saw as viewers, were like, okay, it just seemed like she was making up certain things and prescribing it to Quinn, which then she talked to Chemo and to Core about this. And so what they kind of kept it to themselves and didn't want to let Quinn know. And that's kind of what David's referencing.
Well, they wanted to let Quinn know. They just didn't want to tell him.
They want to tell, a little difference with there, but they didn't. And so what we saw happen there is that it worked its way out because Quinn just kind of became a undying servant to her in a lot of ways in the game, and I guess won her over eventually, where she's like, oh, he's not icky anymore. But I think that's a perfect example of how her emotions controlled her game. She kind of just rocked with vibes. Like if somebody had a good vibe, she was with them. If somebody didn't, it didn't. And that was kind of fun to watch in the beginning portion, not the icky part of the Quinn things, but just like a player who just doesn't want to, because in my head, I was like, okay, they're going to turn it on when it gets game time. This is kind of the portrayal of it. Wasn't a portrayal of it. It was they left the house thinking, all right, there's nothing I could change in the game to actually fix my game. But yeah, as we went forward too, we saw this emotions control her, where she, for whatever reason, felt that McKenzie would be basically her closest ally in all these different ways. Chelsea would work with her Cam in the last minute because they have good vibes. They've worked together, all other things. They wouldn't. Why would they want to get Leah out? Because I don't think she realized that actually, hey, you have been playing strategically badly. You're not owing your allies anything, but you feel emotionally connected to these players because of what they say. And I'll give credit to Chelsea. She's done a really good way of making sure players on the way out of the house or in it feel some form of connection to her. I think it was a perfect version of when she worked Quinn emotionally. So I give it to Chelsea. That I think she misted completely Leah in this regard. But yeah, I mean, I think there's no doubt that Leah was controlled by her emotions in this game.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing about going back to the Quinn stuff is the way it completely flipped late in Quinn's game when he became her number one. And then instead of not wanting to spend any time with him, all she wanted to do was spend time with him, which reinforced how they were a duo. And when he was nominated, she made things even worse by isolating herself. She was so pissed at Chelsea, but she needed to put that aside and didn't until the next week when she became HOH, and she should have, and instead started doing everything Chelsea wanted. But emotions really were the game for Leah. She didn't like Quinn and some others early on, so she didn't want to play the game with them. As she grew to like him, she became tied with him in the game. She was close with McKenzie, so she thought that meant they'd play the game together. She grew close to Angela, so they became a duo after the hiccup of Angela throwing her and Quinn under the bus due to her paranoid delusions that she passed along to Chelsea, but then came back again. She thought she and Rubina were friends, so she could air her true game thoughts to her, and so on. She just, her emotions ruled, and she just kept forgetting she was actually in a game.
It's a game for $750,000. At this point in the game, when you're this far, the players are here to play to win, and your emotions don't really matter. They should be. They should be. Some of them are.
I think about approximately one of them still is, but yeah.
Shout out to the Cribs at the Dog. We'll get to him eventually.
Yeah.
Well, we know he won't because he's going to win the game now. That's my new. My new. David's going to have to wear a new shirt for that one.
Yeah. No, I'll wear the same shirt.
But do you feel like there was anybody else who went home this week that was potentially even more emotionally driven in their game than Leah?
Hold on, let me think about this. Was there anyone else? Well, there was this one person who was like a tornado, a whirlwind. If the conditions were right, it could spring up out of nowhere with very little warning and rampage through the house. But the thing is, with tornadoes, you can study the conditions and see, okay, there's a tornado watch out because the conditions are right for this to occur. But not so for Angela, because she could take any little thing out of context, get sudden delusions about it, and the whirlwind whips up. And most of it was just driven by pure emotional insecurity. Now, most people get insecure when they feel that they aren't safe. Angela was often the opposite, because look at how it started. She was the first HOA, the safest person in the house. But when people told her they wanted to work with her, she instead convinced herself they were all actors in a low budget movie. About a week after Tucker saved her, fast forward, and wanted to work with her, she convinced herself that he had turned on her. About a week after Leah had saved her, she saw late night laughing and assumed it must be about a plot to turn on her. Anytime she saw someone whispering, it had to be about her. It just went on and on and on. And she would spin up, and who knew what would happen next? Did it make it entertaining to watch for some and incredibly frustrating to watch for others? Absolutely. Was any of it good gameplay? Absolutely not.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a part of her game we can't cover that, or can cover that wasn't emotionally driven. I mean, she was, like you said, I don't think I could say it any better. She was a hurricane of emotions from the game of being safe to when she was on the block. I mean, there wasn't a week in or week out that she didn't let it drive her. And I mean, for her, maybe it was the fuel. Maybe she needed that to kind of get through every situation. That's kind of the way she operates. But Lord, for the house gets in there, they were in for it for every single week, whether she was on the block or in power. You are not safe from Angela the way she played the game.
Yeah.
I thought that the Hurricane might be able to take her all the way in, and I think if she wins that double eviction right here, where she was one vote or not one vote, one number away. And also, I kind of hate. I know it's based on like it's deal or no deal or whatever. I hate the idea that if you go over the
Price is
number,
right.
you should.
Price is
Yeah,
right. Yes.
price is right. It should be closest to the number. It shouldn't be over for the number. It should be closest to it.
Part of the strategy. But
I know.
also that Chelsea left a number off. I mean, it's pretty obvious that she left a number off. She was trying to write, and she believed she had written 10,080, not 1,080. Because if you do the math, that's like a week in minutes. And when you saw her, the look on her face, as soon as Julie said 10,000, she got all excited because she knew she was going to win. She didn't realize she had written 1,000. She left a zero off. It would have, oh my gosh, can you imagine if Angela had given a more reasonable answer and had won because Chelsea left a zero off?
That would have been great. What if they're both over?
Then it's the closest.
Closest, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it hurts me. That aside, though, that's very good. You should, if you haven't made a video about that one, you should have made that, David.
That's coming.
Cool insight. It's coming. Okay, good. Love that. Make sure you check out his socials for that, which I'll give you the link soon enough. That aside, though, yes, I mean every portion of it. I was under the opinion that I think her tornado of emotions might be able to get her to the finish line the way she was playing it, because she also had ability to win competitions alongside this emotion. But yeah, every bit of it. I mean, I think every past house guest has something to say about her at this point in this house, and it's probably specifically about how she interacted with them, good or bad.
Yeah. All right, we can go to the fifth rule. It says players need to pretend to be nice and play the social game. Leah had some definite ups and downs here. We've discussed how she had no strategic aim in the first half. Pretty much all she was doing was being social. The thing is, it was more of a, hey, let's be friends type of mode rather than as part of a social game. It may be hard to remember back this far, but while Joseph and Quinn were trying to flirt with Leah, Leah was flirting with Cam for a while. Now, we may have mostly forgotten this, but you better believe that Chelsea remembers it. And while it was happening, Quinn tried to warn her that people said she was playing Cam. And she got upset and started grilling him. Who said that? Who said that? And he was like, everybody. But that changed fairly quickly. And Leah even said about Cam a little later, I will throw him out of the window my damn self. I have no trust in him. He has beyond icked me out. And of course, we know that icking Leah out is the worst possible offense. Indeed, I would say the one place where she did actually follow this rule in terms of pretending to be nice was in the game when she said Quinn icked her out. But she still played along at being nice to him in front of him while telling others her true feelings. Now, as I mentioned earlier, maybe she shouldn't have been so honest about those true feelings to everyone else, and she was lucky not to get busted for it at the time. But eventually, Quinn's ick turned into their mutual crush.
Yeah, I feel like if there's one portion of these rules where Leah maybe excelled a little bit more was this portion of it. Her social game, calling it again the game portion of it, leave out. It was just being social. But I
Yeah.
do think because of her charm she had, her ability to conversate, she was able to bring people to her when she didn't offer much game level. From having Quinn kind of fall for her, having Joseph fall for her, having a working relationship with McKenzie for very long in the game, with Angela as well, and later on in it, and then kind of working back and forth with things. It was basically because of her social ability. So I can't really down her too much on this section of it because I do think this is the one portion of it that helped her get as far as she did. Excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Things changed over time with her, like her opinion of Quinn. But even other people. She has talked about being with McKenzie since pretty much the beginning. In fact, she wasn't a big fan of McKenzie early. At one point, she said the relationship she had with McKenzie was very surface level, and McKenzie kept trying to get involved in whatever she was doing. Like Leah was cleaning, so McKenzie joined in. Leah was making brownies, so McKenzie joined in. McKenzie started stealing her jokes and mannerisms and mirroring her. But along the way, all those things kind of fell to the side. It was another case of her being lucky. Nobody said anything about it to McKenzie because she, again, talked to other people about it. So, yeah, I would say overall, her early social game wasn't so bad as to get herself voted out, obviously, but she didn't do anything particularly good to give herself the solid foundation in the game that would help her out later. As we've discussed, she thought that she was super tight with McKenzie. But clearly that wasn't enough to keep her safe. She thought she was friends with Rubina. But as soon as she told her something incriminating, it got passed around the house. I suspect they'll all be friends to one level or another outside the game. But inside the game, she had a much higher confidence in those relationships than was
Mm-hmm.
actually warranted.
I think for me, the way I view it is that her social games got her to such a point with them, but then you need the actual strategy to
Right.
have to make sure you're an asset, and she just didn't have that. It's kind of like everyone knows that you usually have a friend who's just such a charmer. They're such a good person where like they can charm people, but they kind of just let their talents stay away, so you don't work as much as they get far with
Mm-hmm.
their innate charm with it versus putting in the work with it. So if they put both those combinations in, they'd be a deadly combo. And I kind of feel like that was the issue with Leah. If she put a little bit working strategy of the game, combined with that, we would see some fruition in actual autonomy and equity, winner equity in her game. But it wasn't.
Well, yeah, she thought that just being friendly with people would mean that, oh, okay, that means we're together. No,
Yeah.
no, that's not the way it works.
Nope.
Now, Angela's social game was a whole other story. Again, a real roller coaster ride. She told Mike Bloom in her interview that she believes the veto was used on her by, by other people 3 times because of her relationships and who she is as a person. No, we'll get more into it in the next rule. But the veto was used on her because it benefited the game of the person doing it, not because she was some sort of social super genius.
Angela wasn't a super genius. Is that what you're
I,
saying? Is that your
that
argument?
that is what I'm saying. I'm sorry to break
Wrong.
that to you.
Super genius Angela right here used her
No,
social game in
it's
every
highly
component of the
unlikely.
game.
Highly
Yeah,
unlikely.
she didn't. She playing. I think she had one hypothesis and one theory she wanted to test that going game. Can I win the game despite having a social game? Because that was Angela's full-on thing, and I think it was. I think it's unique to Angela. It would not work for anybody else. I think people viewed Angela in such a way where she was like the evil mom role, where she's like, "I'll be your mother, but I will make you feel horrible about yourself." Because that was what Angela was doing in so many shapes or forms. I mean, the way she would just talk to people. I think I hate going back to week one, but I do think it sets the tone of it
Oh
all.
yeah.
What she talked to Matt. I mean, we look back at it, we can see it, and for whatever traits Matt had that were like, okay, well, this might not work. It didn't seem like warranted whatsoever. The things she was saying to Matt at that extreme level, and I think we see it get toned down. Unfortunately, though, for Angela, it continues to be some shape or form. She could never stop herself from just attacking the game. She would attack the person. She would talk
Mm-hmm.
about them, and it wears on you. And it's impressive that she was able to, you know, get as far in the game as she did. And I don't think she doesn't win those competitions either. She finds a way to keep herself there. She was a feared person. She was the evil stepmom for a bit. You know, she was the person that you're not sure, the Cruella de Vil that made her way there. She did not get far in the game because of her kindness. That is for sure.
Yeah, and she admitted in interviews that she shot herself in the foot with the way she acted early. And we, of course, know the stairway speech to Crazy Eyes Matt and her talking about others who thought they were pulling her into an alliance. And then, of course, there was her war with Lisa, which included making fun of her, calling her Tinkerbell, which never made it to the show or even the feeds. Called her a twit multiple times, and we saw her lash out at Quinn, which had the effect of pushing him away, etc. Angela told Mike Bloom, outside of the game, I definitely am opinionated. Like my kids say, I will give you my opinion whether you want it or not. I think that coincided with what happened with Quinn and Lisa and Matt. It's hard to bite my tongue, but in here, when you're living under a pressure cooker situation and everything is very heightened, it just came out. And how it affected me is in a negative way. And trying to recover from that and move forward with my game. I shot myself in the foot with it. I should have held my tongue, but I didn't. And I had a chance to do a lot of cleanup. That was very messy. It was a lot of recovery for me, and I made my game hard by having a big mouth. Honestly, I thought she did a pretty good summary of herself in terms of this rule. One thing that she did do that, she said, you'll always get my opinion. Okay, but she went beyond just opinions, making fun of the way Lisa walked, calling her a twit, um, making fun of Matt's eyes, just all these things that went beyond giving an opinion. They were personal attacks on that person.
Yeah, I mean, when you say it all out loud, it's just like it's unbelievable that she was able to do as well as she did. She went in the game
Yeah.
because she would just keep on saying those things. And I think, I don't without like looking too into it, 'cause I want to stay on game and stuff like that. I do think there was a level of self insecurity that, I mean, at the end we see her basically saying like, I in her interview with Julie saying like, she's so proud of herself because she was able to do this. She's a strong woman, A, B, and C, which is great. I love all that,
Mm-hmm.
hearing that. I think though got this confidence playing in a game that she probably didn't have prior to it, or at least in the beginning of the game, and that made her lash out. That's not a justification by any means, but I think that's why she continuously did it. We saw it because it came from a place of insecurity where she would just attack people for no reason, and she talks about it why she did this, but she would continuously do it. And we're like, this is not game, this is not social, this is just part of who she is in that portion. Hopefully, though, outside of the house, this doesn't become a thing for her. I hope not, because it got very ugly. And again, it was kind of funny in portions. I think a lot of us found humor in different occasions of it
Mm-hmm.
because it was Angela as this like um, mother figure saying all this stuff versus if we had anybody like me or anybody else saying, you'd be like, you're a jerk, you're completely out of line. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that maybe she comes back eventually because I think she's probably one of the first to get caught in certain ways, and maybe she just tones it down just a little bit, but keeps the humor.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, she did make things difficult for herself with her social game. And, you talked about some of the you know, some of her switches, T-Core called her personality changes scary. Cedric said she didn't have control of her emotions. Joseph called her delusional in his interviews. And she did rehabilitate her image in the house somewhat. But even as recently as last week, various people were still talking about how there was no way they could ever vote for her to win at the end because of how she acted. And now listen to this. There was no way they could ever vote for her to win at the end. T-Core and Rubina talked about it. Chelsea and T-Core also talked about it, with Chelsea saying the fact that Angela was still there makes me want to poke my eyeballs out. And T-Core noted that even with her comp wins, the negative was her social game. Then in another discussion with those two plus Rubina, Tikor and Chelsea said Angela definitely wanted it, but Rubina chimed in, doesn't mean I want to give it to her.
Yeah, I mean, she proved that despite a social game, you can still make it far in the house. And again, I think she wins out in some shape or
Well,
form. And she's next to Cam. Maybe she finds a way to bring it out there. But yeah,
yeah. Now, the other thing is, and this is part of, when I did my very difficult mathematical calculations to come to the 0% chance she had of winning, I was also that it wasn't just, okay, she'll make it to the end and lose. It was also making it to the end because, like, McKenzie's reason for really pushing to evict Angela was very much based on personality rather than strategy. Even in the double eviction, it probably would have made more sense for Chelsea and Cam to take out McKenzie. But Angela has just made herself the easy target over time. And there wasn't the usual week to think about it and realize that, maybe there's a better strategic decision. They went with their feelings. And Angela's social game, a big part of it was a big part of the social game in general is not necessarily using it to win. You can, people do use it to win. But another aspect of it is not being so bad at it that people want to vote you out.
Yeah, I mean, I think we see this at the end where they need to figure out. There's a lot of justifications to get Angela out, and I think Angela's like, I am the threat. But at that point, it's like, who do I like the
Mm-hmm.
least right now in this moment? And we kind of see that being pushed forward because I do think, like you mentioned, it's something that I think we can talk about also. Ironically, making her a threat. I don't know if it does really exactly, but her being such bad social game made Chelsea want to take her out over the other people because maybe this idea of like, I want the people who are here, the final five, to be people I like. And again, that's not as strategic gameplay, but we find out a lot of times when you're with them for so long, the other
Well,
players,
yeah,
there's a
I th-
part of it.
I think a lot more of it was people who like me,
Mm.
which we'll get to, I think, in Rule 6. But as we move to Rule 6, unless you had more, um, let's first talk about Leah because this rule warns against being too much of a threat. Now, I don't think anyone actually believed Leah was a threat in the game, at least not beyond the fact that Chelsea couldn't be sure she was 100% loyal to her and therefore was a threat in that way. Although, as we mentioned, now Leah claimed in her interview she was 100% loyal to her. But the point is that if anyone could have guaranteed that they would go to the end with Leah, I think they probably would have accepted that. Like if someone came to one of the players and said, okay, here's what's going to happen. You can either vote her out now or you will automatically go to the end with Leah. Which would you rather have happen? They'd be like, take me to the end with Leah. I mean, yes, Chelsea and Cam told McKenzie that Leah was a threat, but that was BS. Like using the fact she'd never been on the block. So what? That was mostly because nobody cared enough to do it. Like I said earlier, during the first part of the season, I often forgot she was even there. And then later, when her name did come up, there was someone else who others thought was more important to get rid of, like Quinn. But like I said, she wasn't seen by Chelsea as one of the people who was most loyal specifically to her. So that was an issue.
Yeah, I think the only vote she might have had in jury at this point would have been Quinn. If so, maybe he would have been,
Oh, he
maybe
would have
he
voted
voted.
for her. It wouldn't have mattered what else happened. He would have voted for her.
I hope
Let's be
that,
honest.
yes, probably not, but I'm hoping Quinn would try to make a strategic decision at the end of
He
his
would
jury
have
vote.
he would have rationalized a strategic alleged reason for it, but there was absolutely no way he wouldn't vote for her.
Yeah, I think Leah, unfortunately, though, specifically for Chelsea, too, was the person because she knew she was going after her as well. I mean, that's a threat level in itself.
Mhm.
She also kind of like made herself a threat to the point that she got out T Core, and you think of Kimo and Rubina, and think, all right, are we next? You can't trust Leah,
Right.
at that point, and knowing she's going after Chelsea. Ironically, the only person you probably could have trusted Leah was McKenzie, being the
Right.
person who sent her home. So
Yeah.
every other player was in their best indication. Let's get her out. So yeah, I mean, I think at that point, her threat level. She wanted some competition. She had a little bit more competition prowess than maybe Rubina and Chemo. But yeah, I think it was more so of where was she basically pointing her actions against, and she was basically pointing against everyone except McKenzie. So how McKenzie got missed so much is to be told another day. But for today,
Yes. So as we move to Angela, this will, probably be the most controversial part of the podcast because, as we know, you called her a front runner last week, while I said she had a 0% chance to win. Now, some fans did believe she was on the rise and she could have gotten the votes at the end if she'd made that far. And I still say no, unless it was a very strange situation. But we'll never know because, as I said, part of the calculation was she could get voted out sooner. Much like with Leah, some of the people in the Big Brother house pushed the idea that she could win, and their perception is more important here. But going back to early August, Tucker said Angela's not a threat. That's the only thing she's not. But he couldn't have foreseen how long she'd still be around. McKenzie recently said Angela has been building up a resume with comp wins, and she's been saved off the block, including by McKenzie herself. Even so, she added that nobody thought she could win, but she was a threat. And indeed, people kept telling me for a few weeks now, Angela's a threat. She's a threat. Look at all she's done. She's a threat. She survived all those times being nominated. They totally missed the point. That didn't make her a threat. She was nominated because she was expendable. She survived not because of work she did, but because the players wanted the other person on the block gone. Quinn called it out early that getting nominated against her would almost ensure you went home. Chelsea later told Angela essentially the same thing, that she was the perpetual pawn and anyone next to her was in danger. Now, I will admit, Angela built up a little bit of a comp resume, but from the perspective of a threat to win, we repeatedly heard people talking about how she had treated others, as I mentioned earlier, and how they would not vote for her at the end. I mentioned that conversation between Chelsea and T-Core in the previous rule, but it also continued. And they said if Angela made it to the end, it wouldn't be by her own doing, but by other people's. Even McKenzie, who is not exactly the most strategically brilliant person in the house, could see that Angela was only still there due to their individual games, not due to her actions. This may be the only time I say McKenzie was right.
Ooh, McKenzie was right. Clip that right there. I think for Angela, I think there's two ways to be a threat, right? You have the threat to win the game, but also I think you kind of touched on it, a threat to be taken to the end. It's a spot against somebody else. And I think that might have been a worry for some players like Chelsea, for example, where she's worried that people might look at Angela as somebody. It doesn't matter how misting she does it, how she works to be Cam's number 2, she becomes McKenzie's number 2. Angela is a pretty good person to take to the end if you don't feel like you have other chances, because there's two ways it could go. It could that I think she could potentially win it, or it could be one of the players who are super polarized because you don't know who's going to vote for her. Because if you take Chemo down to the end, he has some instant votes there, all right? If Rubina and T-Core are in the jury, Rubina has some instant votes there. Cam, questionable if he has any instant votes there. McKenzie probably has some votes there. Angela, you don't know. She's kind of a wild card, you know? So I think because of that level, she does become a threat where we do need to take her out. Because if we don't take her out right now, very strong chance she would go to the end with somebody else. Also, she's able to align herself with anybody at any time. So it's one of those things where it's a wild card. It's kind of like you just get rid of the jokers in the deck of cards, and that's what Angela was to them.
She was the jokers.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's that's the thing. I mentioned it with Leah too. She's a threat to Chelsea because she's not loyal to Chelsea. And if she's not loyal to Chelsea, well, then that could cause possible problems. And then, like you said, that's a perfect point you brought up. Let's say that they keep Angela around, that let's say Chelsea gets the wild idea. Okay, I'm going to go to the end against Angela because she's easy to beat. And then the other person wins that final HOH comp and says, well, I'm not going against Chelsea. I'm taking Angela. Whereas you get rid of Angela and things are a little bit more even, or at least could
Mm-hmm.
be perceived as being even.
No doubt. And I think it's one of those things where you can plan a little bit more around
Right.
as you're gaming it through, which we love to do, figuring out the best pathway. But when you keep Angela in there, it throws a cog in the gears where you're like, ugh, like somebody like I love Cam. I trust him. Would he backstab me at the end for Cam? Maybe. Would he backstab me for chemo? Maybe not. So
Right. Yeah. All right, we can go to the seventh rule, which says to trust almost nobody. And Leah clearly had major problems here. We've discussed a lot of them already, but just in the past 2 weeks, she trusted Chelsea and did her bidding, despite the fact that Chelsea had just blindsided her two closest allies. She trusted McKenzie to keep her safe in the game and not lie to her because she felt they were friends. She trusted Rubina enough to reveal her inner thoughts about how she shouldn't have taken out T-Core last week. I'd like to say I don't know how you can be in the house for over 2 months and still trust people to that level, but it just goes back to Leah still not understanding that she's playing a game.
yeah, she didn't realize the essence of this game in any shape or form, and I think this is a testament to it. I mean, kept on thinking that she could. I mean, trust people that she backstabbed right away because thinking that maybe they wouldn't care about it because they viewed the game the same way she viewed the game. That nothing really matters in here.
Yeah.
I think you put it completely. There's nothing more we could add to that. She trusted. She needed to just kind of trust her. You know what? I disagree. She couldn't even trust herself because when she trusted herself to make her own judgment, it didn't work out. She should have trusted some other people in the right time. Anytime she needed to trust somebody else, she would trust herself and vice versa.
Yeah.
So again, do the opposite.
Yeah. Now, Angela was another story entirely. The only person she trusted at the end was Leah. And as we discussed, even that wavered during one of her delusional times. Sure, she temporarily trusted other people in the game, but it never lasted because she always believed they were plotting against her. It was like if you took Kat Dunn's joke line of, "Are you bitches conspiring against me?" and you made it real. Angela always assumed that people were conspiring against her. And while it's not a bad thing to worry about that in Big Brother, you can't go through the whole game assuming that everybody is always doing it and that it's always about you.
Never did I think I would live through the day where David Bloomberg would be quoting, "Are you bitches conspiring against me?" I love that. I need that. I need to get a whole video clip of that now and use it forever. That aside, I think if you could do the opposite rule for Angela, she did this because unfortunately she needed to trust some people. She trusted nobody at all in this house, and no one could trust her. Any information that would go to her found a way to go through the nether, and that's kind of probably the worst thing in the house you could get marked as completely trustless. So she was able to get that title because anytime somebody told her something, she would tell them any alliance, she'd find her a way there. She would be there. The worry about nominating Angela wasn't about her going home, is what secrets was she would tell when she got on the block because she would let it all out.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have Appendix A, which is about the jury phase of the game and deals both with how these two were doing in preparing to possibly be at the end, as well as whether the other remaining players did what they needed to get them on their side at the end, and how this will impact the jury. Considering what I just said a few minutes ago about Angela not being a threat to win, I think it's pretty clear I don't think she did a good job of getting the jury on her side. I think I said something similar about Leah, though, of course, as I also said, she automatically has Quinn. So there's that one vote, I guess. It would have been interesting, to say the least, if these two had, in some weird parallel universe, made it to the end together.
Would have been fun.
But I mean, that might have tested my 0% chance. That might have been the 0.49% that I was talking about. But it didn't happen, so we don't have to worry about it.
Not in this world. Not in this universe we have to worry about.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Leah had one, jury block there from Quinn, and she played it smart enough. Like we said, she had everything kind of set up for her. She could have got Joseph into the jury, and she would have had two.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's what you need, those people. And also, Quinn being the first person in jury could be a big influential person to kind of start conversations. I mean, she really had it let up for her. Angela, on the other hand, had probably no warriors for her in the jury house. I mean, it would have been very interesting to see because it had to be a specific combination. It had to be people who'd probably value her comp ability, her able to maneuver things. But anybody in the house already has been insulted by Angela in some shape or form. It's curious to see how much it would have been. I think most of her insults go into pre-jury versus jury time, but I do think it'd be a toss-up. Them being in the jury house, though, will be very interesting to see how it goes. We saw Angela talk about how she basically thinks Chemo is the person to win this game, which I'm very curious to see how this will now impact things going forward, because that's something I could have never seen coming from her.
Oh, I could have definitely. I mean, because, you know, don't forget, Chemo, he has already done something that we thought was almost impossible, which was apparently flip 2 votes with his final speech. And he's just adored overall. So, I don't think Chemo will make it to the end, because I do think the other people are like, wow, people really love him way too much. He'll just get up there as his final speech and sing. But yeah. As far as the others, um, if we look at the interviews that Leah did, it seems pretty clear she still holds Chelsea in the highest esteem of the game. She told Dalton Ross, Chelsea has a really great chance of going far in the game because nobody suspects her as a threat. She's very well insulated, very well spoken, and overall knows the game very well. Basically all the things that Leah was not. Chelsea had a hand in crafting this image of herself because she took the time to talk to Leah, even as she was getting her out of the house. And she was planting her seeds as well, telling Leah that she was really upset with Chemo because he'd been planting seeds for weeks and she should have known. Now, I don't know if Leah fully believed that or not, or what she may find out, when Chemo eventually ends up in the jury house. But it's still a good ploy. Although I do think that blaming Chemo, to me, just made me laugh. But apparently they're buying it. I think Rubina said something on the live feeds, and this may have happened after the eviction, but it's not spoilery. I think she said, I don't think he's Chemo, I think he's Schemo. And it's like, that's very clever. Has absolutely nothing to do with Chemo as a person, actually. The idea that he should be called Schemo.
Schemo there. No, and I want to clarify too. I don't think I've actually come a long ways around for Chemo in his game too. I think there's some equity there for sure because of his charm there. But I was just surprised with Angela that being the game for in her mind she respects. I just can't read her sometimes. But yeah, no, I think it's going to be very interesting to see as we go on. We have either a very interesting final two potential or a very, I don't mean to say underwhelming, but potentially could be a railroad at the end too. I could see both ways. So the only way, though, I think we get some sort of interesting final two is that if we don't see Chelsea in the final two. By that I mean, I think it's a runaway win.
I mean, I call Chelsea win at this point interesting, and I know other people are like, the season just got boring. But no, a Chelsea win is not boring to me.
No,
I mean, you're not going to have explosions on the feed like you might have otherwise. But I mean, that always happens around this time. There's only 5 people left. They're not going to get into huge knockdown, drag out brawls most of the time. So at this point, we just, the interesting part is seeing how Chelsea maneuvers if she can make her way to the end. Because that's another thing Leah told Mike Bloom was she viewed McKenzie's game as shaky and thinks she's playing for second place. Frankly, I think she's playing for 4th or 5th place. But the point is she won't win, and so. But I mean, even Leah thinks at best she's playing for second. I think at best everybody but Chelsea is playing for second.
I agree. I think that's why I said I think it'd find it less interesting. I think she'd be a deserved winner. I think she'd be good at it. I just think she is at this point in the game leagues above every other player that's in the house right now. That it will be a unanimous. It should be if Chelsea's in the final two, unless something crazy happens, it should be a unanimous win for Chelsea. I can see Chemo being the only person now, which I probably wouldn't, or Rubina, but probably Chemo, I think, just because how they're viewing him, have the best chance now against Chelsea.
Yeah,
I think it'd be hilarious to see Cam in the final two and him somehow to get shout out to his dogs in the crib one last time on the jury table.
Yeah.
Cam winning would probably, unfortunately, implode the fandom and everybody else into it. Because how Cam won would be a very interesting segment for us to create.
Yeah, yes, it would. Hopefully, we won't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
But it is time to wrap things up on these two. So, what are your final thoughts on Leah and Angela?
Oof. Two parallel games in a sense of one playing too little and one doing too much. The difference is that for Leah and her game, for me, is that she was truly handed all the tools to be successful in this game, from having a pathway of social game where she could work with people who threw themselves to her, from two undying loyal fans of the game, literally ready to sacrifice their game, Quinn and Joseph, from all the players and this cast being built in a way that they did not want to share any information with one another when other people were talking bad with each other. I mean, she could have got exposed so many times, but she found a way to go through. Found herself finally near the end of the game in which she just continued to do what she did from the beginning game, and it was not use any strategic prowess to connect with people. That sunk her ship. On the other side of things, with Angela, she did too much. She was a hurricane of emotions, as David said. And we found her being a storm of wherever she went to, breaking down and very little building anything up. How she made it as far as she did, I was very surprised. But she was not handed any tools within the game. She kind of fought her way out. Was probably one of the most entertaining players I've seen on this house, with a little bit of, I don't want her in this house anymore, to finally being like, I think she could potentially win it. David will always disagree with me on that fact. Overall, I think very fun to watch each of these players in different ways. One where I want to rip my hair out, and one I want to rip my hair out even more so. They both went home, though, for similar reasons, and it was their strategy. Leah went from a lack of strategy, and Angela went home because she had too much strategy that she could not enact rightfully. For both these reasons, they went home.
So before I give my thoughts, I wanted to say one thing. You said that nobody gave Angela any tools. Well, three of them gave her vetoes. So, you know.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, while Leah and Angela were seen as a duo at the end, as they were voted out within an hour of each other, their games were really not at all similar. Leah played barely for most of the game, while Angela played enough for 3 or 4 people most of the time. Leah didn't know there was even strategy in the house at first, while Angela deluded herself into thinking there was far more strategy going on than there actually was. And it was all directed at her. Leah's social game was neither so good nor so bad that it caused her to be a target, while Angela's was terrible from the start, as she had to dig herself out of it. But people still remembered and had their negative thoughts about her. But they do have the similarity that neither of them was an actual threat to win the game, while both of them had people in the house claiming they were threats because they did not appear to be 100% on board with them specifically. And really, even if Leah's words now in interviews would have held true and she'd have stayed and would have indeed been loyal to Chelsea and Cam and McKenzie, you can't beat the kind of loyalty that Chelsea has gotten from the Chemo Rubina duo, because in the end, Leah would have preferred Angela and McKenzie. And of course, Angela wasn't going to ride to the end with Chelsea either, as she made it clear she wanted to go with Leah or Chemo. So whether they were threats to win in the end didn't really matter. What mattered was they weren't loyal soldiers to the person who is controlling the puppets, Chelsea. I guess I mixed my metaphors there. Both of them did things from the very start to put themselves on the outs, and they never fully recovered. It's true that in Big Brother, you don't want to come out guns blazing like a Tucker. You need to sit back and bide your time while building your power base. Leah sat back way too much and never had a base. Angela blew up everyone who might have even ever had a chance of being part of her base. That made them both much easier picking when the time came. And that is why Leah and Angela lost.
Well said, David. Well said.
Thank you. All right. Well, we will have our spoiler-free predictions in a moment after a few other pieces of information. But if you want all our full spoilery thoughts, we are all over social media.
That's right, David. Don't forget, both of us are very active on a number of different social media platforms where we discuss Big Brother and other topics. On Twitter, I'm at the Obi Kabir. On Instagram, I'm at Obi Kabir. And on TikTok, I'm at Basmati Boy. But David is truly all over the place, but you can track him down a few ways. The best way to find him in his various accounts is through his link tree at linktree/David Bloomberg. Or you can find him on his Twitter and Blue Sky at David Bloomberg. On Threads, he is at David Bloomberg TV. And alongside that, on Instagram and other video platforms like TikTok and YouTube, he's at David Bloomberg TV as well.
Yeah, I've been posting, I usually come on here and say I've been posting at least 3 videos. Well, this past week, I feel like it's been 4 or 5 every day, all on, like I said, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, about Big Brother, Survivor, Big Brother live feeds, occasionally my thoughts on stuff that's happening, along with clips. Also, a couple sprinkled in from the Anonymous, the Circle. So you've got a variety of different shows happening there. So again, I'm at David Bloomberg TV at those different locations, and come join us there. All right. With that, we have our spoiler-free predictions. So these were written up before we knew the outcome of the HOH comp. This one is interesting to me because Chelsea can't compete. Cam can't win anything. Rubina can't win anything. And Chemo surprised us by winning the veto, but usually can't win anything. So I think McKenzie is going to turn around and win HOH again because who else is going to do it? In fact, it may be the only thing that saves her because there's already been talk this week, about, McKenzie's got to go next. Now, it still won't save her game overall because my bet is she has been fully immersed back in the Chelsea mist and she'll just nominate Chemo and Rubina. And then if one of them win veto, she'll put up Cam, but it won't matter. I think Chemo is finally going to be headed out the door this week.
I hate your prediction. I hope it doesn't come true. We both, David and I, sent each other predictions before the show. My prediction was Rubina wins. I'm going for broke. I'm finally hoping they break the streak of actually not winning anything where she wins it. She wins it, and now she puts, hopefully, I would imagine McKenzie up there. And I'm thinking Chelsea, unless she's missed it, she could put Cam. But I think the goal would be to get, hopefully, Chelsea out or potentially McKenzie. We'll see one way or the other.
I still think they're missed it. I still think they're following the T-Core's words to them of stick with Chelsea. I think the mist just extends through the whole house. But
I hope Cam, if he's on there, wins the veto, takes him off. Chelsea's on there, and now Cam and Chemo have to go somehow to vote for Chelsea out. We'll see.
Yeah. Okay.
But as we wrap up, I want to encourage people to check out our RHAP patron program at robhasawebsite.com/patron. Rob has several patron-only podcasts for Big Brother, plus other perks like the Facebook group and Discord. You can help support shows like ours and everything on the network by tuning on and becoming a patron at robhasawebsite.com/patron. And
make sure you're subscribed to all of the RHAP podcasts by going to the newly rebranded RHAP We Know Reality TV podcasts at WeKnowRealityTV.com. and selecting your podcast service of choice. And you'll not only find content like us and daily live feed updates, but also you'll find stuff from other shows like Survivor, the other Why Blank Lost, and a number of other shows and topics. Speaking of those Survivor podcasts, I already mentioned, in under 2 hours, Jessica Lewis and I will be recording our second Survivor 47 Why Blank Lost with special guest Lindsay Carmine from Survivor 43. So it'll still be a couple weeks longer that I will be doing double Why Blank Lost duty. Plus, I'm also co-hosting the Tradar podcast coverage of the Traders Canada Season 2, which started Monday. So that's the Tradar, TRAIDAR, and you can just find that wherever you get your podcasts.
Yes, and finally, we want to thank Scott St. Pierre, Jessica Sterling, and the whole RJP and Reality TV Wrap-Ups behind-the-scenes team for all the work they do from editing and posting and everything else. We really appreciate everything they do to get our voice from our microphones to your ears. Thank you for all the viewers and watchers for tuning in. We're getting close to the end of the season, so we want to hear your thoughts. Let us know in the comments What do you think about this double eviction? Do you think it was the right move? What do you think is going to happen this next week? And who truly has the most winner equity? Does Cam and his dogs at the crib have a chance to beat Chelsea? Or what combination do you want to see? And then also, I have to thank David here for basically doing a double duty. He's doing 2 episodes of Why Blank Lost between Big Brother, Survivor. It is not easy. So please show him some love in the comments because this man is on overdrive. He's giving great content, and we couldn't do it without you, David.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, of course, for another great episode. Keeping caught up. I know that you had a lot going on this past week too. So, everybody, watch for the Survivor version of this podcast, probably available Saturday morning. And we will be back next week as the end grows ever closer. Or find us on social media if you want to see us before then. Bye.